Konbanwa, sensitive souls and seekers of beauty. I am Naomi, and from this space where the soft scent of sandalwood incense mingles with the dim light filtering through the shoji paper panels, creating shadows that dance with the breeze, I warmly and serenely welcome you to Minimalist Charm. Today, I would like to invite you on a fascinating journey, one that will take us beyond the simple reduction of objects in our closets, to delve into the very heart of how we experience the world around us and the one that dwells within us. Together we will explore Japanese sensory minimalism and how, by awakening and refining our five senses with fewer stimuli, but with a much deeper intention, we can discover an unexpected richness, a subtle joy, and a lasting peace hidden in the apparent simplicity of everyday life. I vividly remember a summer afternoon at my grandmother Akiko's house. We were sitting on the Engawa, that polished wooden corridor that opens onto the garden, a space that always seemed to me like a magical threshold between the inner and outer worlds. She was preparing matcha tea with a slowness and grace that turned each gesture into a dance, a meditation in motion. The rhythmic soft sound of the bamboo whisk, the chasen against the ceramic chawan bowl, the vibrant jade-green color of the finely ground tea powder as it dissolved in the hot water, the fresh, vegetal, slightly bitter aroma that rose with the steam, filling the air with a comforting promise, the texture of the bowl warm and slightly rough between my hands, and finally, the complex, bittersweet taste of the tea as it touched my lips, an explosion of nuances that awakened my palate and calmed my spirit. At that moment, in the fullness of that simple yet profound multisensory experience, I understood with crystal clarity that the true richness of the experience did not come from an abundance of external elements, nor from overwhelming intensity, but from mindfulness, from absolute presence, and from a deep appreciation of every sensory detail, however humble it might seem. In our modern world, so fast-paced and technologically mediated, we often live in a state of constant sensory overload. We are relentlessly bombarded by loud and persistent noises, constant traffic, sirens, background music in every public space, by intense, flickering artificial lights that disrupt our natural rhythms, by a myriad of synthetic, pungent odors emanating from cleaning products, air fresheners, and perfumes, by processed, artificially intensified flavors that distance us from the authentic taste of food, and by an avalanche of visual information, advertising, notifications, ubiquitous screens that fiercely compete for our fragmented attention. Our senses, those wonderful doors of perception that connect us to life and pleasure, instead of feeling stimulated and nourished, often feel dulled, numb, fatigued, or even assaulted. We have become accustomed, almost without realizing it, to intensity, to the flashy, to the immediate, and we have progressively lost the ability to appreciate the delicacy, the subtlety, the beauty that resides in the simple, in the quiet, in what is revealed only to those who know how to look, listen, and feel with their hearts. Japanese minimalism, in its deepest and wisest essence, is not just about clearing our physical spaces of unnecessary objects, but also, and perhaps even more transformatively, about clearing our sensory channels so that we can perceive the world and ourselves with greater clarity, depth, sensitivity, and a serene and lasting joy. Today, I want to share with you some reflections and practices inspired by this ancient philosophy, so that we can learn together to nourish our five senses with less, but infinitely better, and thus rediscover the amazing richness that lies hidden in the seemingly simple, in what often goes unnoticed. Let's start with one of our senses that is most constantly assaulted in modern life, sight, and how we can cultivate and protect it through the appreciation of simple beauty, the harmony of forms, and the restorative power of empty space. In Japanese aesthetics, the concept of ma, that intentional empty space, that visual pause we have discussed on other occasions, is absolutely fundamental. It is not just the absence of things, a mere void, but an active and dynamic element that gives meaning, that allows what is present, an object, a work of art, a person, to shine with greater intensity and clarity. A single ikebana flower arrangement, with its clean lines and studied asymmetry, placed in a clear and serene room, can have a much deeper and more lasting visual and emotional impact than a room cluttered with decorative objects competing for our weary attention. Reducing visual clutter in our environment, in our homes and workplaces, is not just a matter of order or superficial aesthetics. It is a way of giving our eyes a vital respite, of reducing the cognitive load on our brains, and of allowing us to focus our gaze and appreciate the intrinsic beauty of the essential, of what truly matters. I think of Carlos, a talented and passionate photographer from Medellin, Colombia, whose studio, although filled with state-of-the-art equipment, inspiring art books, and souvenirs from his travels around the world, had become visually chaotic over time, a maze of stimuli. He felt creatively blocked, and his eyes, he confessed to me with a mixture of resignation and longing, often felt tired, irritated and overwhelmed even before he started working, before he looked through the viewfinder of his camera. Naomi, it's as if there's so much visual noise around me that I can't find the right frame, either in my studio or in my own mind. Everything looks blurry, confusing, he said with palpable frustration. I suggested that he apply the principles of sensory minimalism to his workspace, that he embark on a conscious process of clearing surfaces, of gratefully putting away anything that was not in active use or no longer brought him joy or inspiration, that he carefully choose a few objects, perhaps a particularly meaningful photograph, a stone picked up on a special trip, a plant with simple lines that truly inspired her, and give them a prominent place, creating that space of respect and contemplation around them. At first it was difficult, as it is for many of us, because she felt an emotional attachment to many of her objects, each with its own story. But as her studio cleared, as air and light began to circulate more freely, she noticed a surprising change not only in the atmosphere, but in her own perception. "My eyes are resting, Naomi. They're really resting," she told me weeks later with renewed energy. "And the most incredible thing is that I'm seeing light in a new way, subtle details, textures that I didn't notice before. It's as if my vision has been sharpened, as if someone had cleaned the lenses of a pair of glasses that had been dirty for years." Reducing excessive visual stimulation allows us to appreciate the elegant shape of a shadow cast on a wall, the subtle play of natural light on a wooden surface, the deep, nuanced color of a ceramic object. I invite you to look at your immediate surroundings with new eyes. Is there a space in your home or workplace that you could simplify visually by freeing it from the superfluous? What unique and meaningful object could you highlight, allowing its singular beauty to be truly seen, felt, and appreciated in all its fullness? This search for visual clarity naturally leads us to consider the sense of hearing and how we can nurture and protect it by cultivating intentional silence and learning to appreciate the subtle symphony of the sounds of life. In our contemporary society, we live immersed, almost drowned, in an ocean of constant and often aggressive noise. The roar of traffic, other people's conversations amplified in public spaces, the ubiquitous and often strident music in shops and restaurants, the incessant notifications from our electronic devices demanding our attention without respite. This constant auditory bombardment is not only physically and mentally exhausting, but also progressively dulls our ability to truly listen, to discern nuances, to appreciate the delicacy of the sounds that surround us and that can be a source of calm and connection. In Japan, on the other hand, there is a deep and ancient appreciation for silence, not as a mere absence of sound, but as a fertile space for introspection, concentration, deep listening, and connection with the transcendent. Think of the serene atmosphere of a Zen temple at dawn, where the only sound you can hear may be the distant song of a bird, the whisper of the wind through the pine needles, or the dry, rhythmic beat of the shishiodoshi, that bamboo fountain designed to scare away deer, whose sound has become a symbol of tranquility in Japanese gardens. I met Lucia, a sensitive and dedicated music teacher in the vibrant but often noisy city of Buenos Aires. Ironically, she, who lived for and by music, felt increasingly sensitive and overwhelmed by the indiscriminate noise of the big city. "I come home after a day of classes and rehearsals with my head buzzing, Naomi," she would say with an expression of fatigue. And the first thing I do, almost instinctively, is turn on music to drown out the noise outside, to create my own bubble. But sometimes I feel like I'm just adding more layers of sound, more stimuli to an already saturated system. I suggested she experiment with intentional silence baths in her daily routine. She should devote at least 15 or 20 minutes a day, perhaps when she woke up in the morning or just before going to sleep at night, to being as quiet as possible, actively seeking that space of auditory stillness. During those moments, instead of fearing the silence or trying to fill it, she should listen to it with the same attention and curiosity with which she would listen to a new symphony, that he pay attention to the subtlest sounds in his own home, the ticking of an old clock he had inherited from his grandmother, the barely perceptible murmur of his own breathing, the occasional creak of the wooden floor as he settled down. At first, he confessed, he found the silence uncomfortable, almost deafening in contrast to the usual hubbub. Her mind resisted, seeking stimulation. But gradually, with perseverance and an open attitude, she began to find in it a refuge, a space of deep calm and restoration. "Now I look forward to my moments of silence, Naomi," she confessed with a radiant smile. "They are like a balm for my soul. And the most surprising thing is that I've started to hear music, my own music and that of others, in a completely new way, with more nuances, more depth, with renewed emotion. It's as if my ears have been tuned, as if they've regained a lost sensitivity. I invite you to actively seek moments of silence in your day. Turn off the car radio on some of your journeys, enjoy dinner without the television in the background, and when you are silent, listen, not just to external sounds, but also to internal ones. What subtle sounds can you discover around you, or even within you, that connect you to the present and bring you serenity?" And so we come to the sense of smell, that direct and powerful gateway to our emotions, to our deepest memories, and how we can refine and enjoy it through the appreciation of natural, authentic, and subtle aromas. Our modern society, with its emphasis on cleanliness and artificiality, floods us with synthetic and often overwhelming fragrances, chemical air fresheners that promise forest or sea scents, but offer only a crude imitation. Intense and penetrating perfumes that seek to leave an indelible trail, cleaning products with strong and persistent odors. These aromas, although sometimes pleasant at first, often mask the natural sense of the world, saturate our olfactory receptors, and can even desensitize our sense of smell, causing us to lose the ability to appreciate the most delicate nuances. Japanese tradition, on the other hand, greatly values natural, ephemeral, and subtle aromas. The clean, slightly citrusy fragrance of freshly laid rice straw tatami mats, the earthy, damp scent of moss in a garden after rain, the delicate spiritual smoke of high-quality incense, such as sandalwood or agarwood, or the ephemeral, almost ethereal scent of a cherry blossom or plum blossom carried on the breeze. Learning to appreciate these subtle aromas requires attention, a calm mind, and a sense of smell unspoiled by artificiality. I remember my own experience when I first visited an old ryokan, a traditional Japanese inn in the mountains of Hakone. As I crossed the threshold, I was greeted by a symphony of incredibly subtle yet deeply evocative aromas. The hinoki cypress wood of the structure, with its clean, slightly resinous fragrance known for its calming properties, the fresh, vegetal smell of tatami, an almost imperceptible hint of incense floating in the air, inviting calm. There was no artificial air freshener, no imposed fragrance, just the clean, natural, harmonious scent of the space itself, of the noble materials with which it was built, and the care with which it was maintained. That experience taught me a lot about how an environment can smell in a way that calms the spirit, lifts the mood, and connects us with the essence of things, rather than assaulting or distracting us. Elena, a talented chef in Mexico City with a passion for fresh ingredients and market cuisine, told me how, after years of working in professional kitchens, often noisy and filled with intense competing smells, she felt that her sense of smell, so crucial to her profession, had become less sensitive to the most delicate nuances, as if it were constantly screaming to be heard. I suggested she start incorporating small olfactory rituals into her home, using only natural and authentic scents. She should air out her house well every morning to eliminate stale odors and allow fresh air to enter, and then introduce, very subtly and consciously, the scent of a few sprigs of fresh eucalyptus in a vase, a few drops of pure lavender or yuzu essential oil in a ceramic diffuser, or the simple, delicious perfume of a perfectly ripe seasonal fruit, such as a mango or guava, placed in a bowl on the table. "It's been like rediscovering a forgotten world, Naomi," she told me enthusiastically. "Now I can appreciate the delicate scent of freshly cut herbs, the sweet, earthy perfume of wet soil after a summer storm, the subtle fragrance of jasmine tea. It's as if my nose has awakened from a long sleep, and with it, my creativity in the kitchen has also been given a new lease of life. I encourage you to consciously reduce your use of artificial fragrances in your home and on your person, and to actively seek out the natural scents that surround you, both in nature and in food and fine materials. Stop to smell a flower on your way, the wood of an antique piece of furniture, freshly ground coffee in the morning, freshly baked bread. What subtle aromas can you identify that bring you a sense of calm, joy, or perhaps a fond memory?" This leads us, almost inevitably, to explore the sense of taste and how we can enrich and educate it through mindful eating, appreciation of pure and natural flavors, and connection to the origin of what we eat. In an era of ultra-processed foods, loaded with refined sugars, excess salt, poor quality fats, and a plethora of artificial flavorings and additives, we often eat automatically, hurriedly, without paying real attention to what we are eating. Our palates, as a result, become accustomed, almost addicted, to intense, simplified, and uncomplex flavors, losing the ability to discern and enjoy the richness of authentic flavors. Traditional Japanese cuisine, on the other hand, with its deep respect for fresh, seasonal ingredients, and its emphasis on simple preparations that seek to highlight, rather than mask, the natural flavor of each food, a concept encapsulated in the search for umami, that subtle, savory, and deeply satisfying fifth flavor found naturally in many ingredients, invites us to a much more refined, conscious, and pleasurable taste experience. Eating from this perspective is not just a physiological need to be quickly satisfied, but a sacred opportunity to delight our senses, nourish our bodies with respect and gratitude, and connect with the cycles of nature. My grandmother Akiko was a living example of this culinary philosophy. Her meals were, in appearance, very simple, but each ingredient was chosen with exquisite care, often from her own small garden or the local market, and prepared with an attention and love that enhanced its intrinsic flavor and vital energy. I remember the unforgettable taste of freshly cooked Japanese rice, gohan, slightly sweet, sticky, and fragrant, the basis of almost all her meals, the delicacy of a piece of fresh salmon steamed with a touch of grated ginger and a few drops of good quality soy sauce, the crunchy texture and earthy sweet flavor of seasonal vegetables, carrots, green beans, shiitake mushrooms, lightly sautéed to preserve their freshness and nutrients. There were no heavy sauces or excessive seasonings to mask the original flavors. Every bite was a celebration of the purity and essence of the ingredient. Isabel, a dedicated nutritionist in Madrid, shared with me her growing concern about how many of her patients, especially the younger ones, had lost touch with the real taste of food. They are so used to the hyper-palatable, artificially intense, and addictive flavors of snacks and fast food that a simple apple, a raw carrot, or baked white fish seems bland and boring to them, she told me with a hint of sadness. I suggested that she herself, as an example, and that she encourage her patients to do so as part of their dietary re-education, practice eating with the 5 senses, a form of mindfulness applied to eating. Before putting food in their mouths, they should take a moment to observe it, appreciate its colors and shapes. They should smell it, trying to identify its aromas. She should feel its texture with her fingers or lips. When chewing, she should do so slowly, several times, paying attention to all the flavors that unfolded, how it transformed in her mouth, and the sensation it produced in her body. "It has been a revelation for many, Naomi," she told me enthusiastically on a later occasion. "They've rediscovered the natural sweetness of a freshly harvested carrot, the refreshing and lively acidity of an orange segment, the aromatic complexity of a good extra virgin olive oil. They're learning to enjoy food in a new way, much more consciously, pleasantly, and, of course, healthily. They're even losing weight without feeling like they're on a diet, simply because they feel more satisfied with less real food. I invite you to try it at your next meal. Choose at least one of your meals a day to eat with this full sensory attention. Turn off distractions, the TV, your cell phone, your computer. Sit comfortably and savor each bite as if it were the first time you've ever tasted that food. You'll be surprised by the richness of flavors you'll discover. Finally, and no less important, we come to the sense of touch, our most intimate and direct connection to the material world around us, and how we can heighten our awareness and enjoyment of it through an appreciation of natural textures, fine materials, and conscious, meaningful touch. In a world increasingly dominated by smooth, cold, synthetic surfaces, the glass screens of our devices, the ubiquitous plastics in objects and packaging, the cold, polished metals of modern architecture, we often lose sight of the immense richness and variety of the tactile experience offered by natural materials. Wood with its unique grain and inherent warmth, ceramics with their earthy porosity and ability to retain heat, linen with its rustic and cool roughness, silk with its fluid and luxurious softness, wool with its comforting embrace. Each natural material has a story to tell our hands, a vibrational quality that can nourish us in subtle but profound ways. Japanese minimalism, with its marked preference for natural materials, quality craftsmanship, and objects that age gracefully, invites us to rediscover and celebrate the pleasure of touch, to surround ourselves with textures that caress the soul. I think of the unmistakable sensation of walking barefoot on a traditional tatami floor, that unique blend of firmness and elastic softness that massages the feet, in the comforting warmth of a handmade raku ceramic bowl, held in your hands on a cold winter's day while sipping steaming tea, in the organic, comforting texture of a thick hand-woven wool blanket draped over your lap while reading a good book. Andres, an innovative architect from Santiago, Chile, known for his avant-garde and minimalist designs, told me how, in his quest for purity of lines and efficiency of modern materials, he had designed his own apartment using predominantly cold, smooth and polished materials such as exposed concrete, stainless steel, and glass. It's elegant, functional, and visually striking, Naomi, but sometimes I feel like I'm living in a sophisticated glass box in a laboratory, he confessed with surprising vulnerability. I miss the warmth, the feeling of home, something that embraces me. I suggested that she gradually and selectively introduce small elements with natural and organic textures that would contrast and complement the modernity of her space. A hand-woven linen cushion on a designer sofa, a jute or sisal rug in the living room, a solid olive wood cutting board in the kitchen, a collection of handcrafted ceramic cups in different textures for her morning coffee. The change has been incredible, Naomi, much more profound than I expected, she told me a few weeks later. Those little touches, those islands of tactile warmth, have completely transformed the feel of the space. I now feel more connected, more rooted in my own home. I enjoy the simple act of touching those surfaces, feeling their history, their imperfection. It's as if my home has gained a soul. I encourage you to pay more conscious attention to the textures that surround you in your everyday life. Look for opportunities to interact with natural materials, both inside and outside your home. Caress the rough bark of a tree in the park. Feel the velvety softness of a flower petal, the cool roughness of a stone picked up on the beach. Choose objects for your home that are not only visually pleasing, but also pleasant and comforting to the touch. My dear friends, Japanese sensory minimalism is, in essence, a loving and profound invitation to live in a more awake, more present, more embodied, and more connected way with the subtle and often elusive beauty that surrounds us in every moment, and that we too often overlook in our daily rush and constant overstimulation. It is not at all about depriving ourselves of pleasurable sensory experiences, but quite the opposite. It is about refining our ability to perceive them in all their richness, to find immense and surprising satisfaction in quality, authenticity, and intention, rather than seeking it in mere quantity or the superficial intensity of stimuli. By gently clearing our sensory channels, by consciously choosing what we allow to enter through our eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and skin, We open the door wide to a world of nuances, genuine delight, and deep inner serenity that we may have forgotten existed. It is like tuning an ancient and valuable musical instrument, only when the strings are at just the right tension, neither too tight nor too loose, and the body of the instrument is clean, well cared for, and free of obstructions, can it resonate with its true, beautiful voice and produce the most moving and sublime music. Similarly, when our senses are attuned, rested, and not overwhelmed by excess, we can perceive the subtle and wonderful melody of life with a completely renewed clarity, depth, and joy. This transformative practice does not require major external changes or costly investments. It only requires a dose of intention, a pinch of loving attention, and a sincere willingness to rediscover the wonder that lies in the simple, the authentic, the essential. As an ancient Japanese poem says, a haiku attributed to the great master Basho, which my grandmother Akiko used to recite softly as she gazed at the full moon reflected in the water of her small pond, an image of perfect serenity, Furu ike ya kawazu tobikomu mizu no oto. This brief composition, which translates roughly as an old pond, a frog jumps in, the sound of water, evokes with unsurpassed mastery the essence of a moment through three simple sensory perceptions: the visual stillness of the pond, the sudden movement of the frog, and the revealing sound of the water. It is a celebration of the beauty found in the direct, immediate, and simple experience of the senses, in the attentive observation of the present moment. May we too learn to find that richness, that poetry, in the small, great things of each day, in the sensory whispers that life constantly offers us, if only we are willing to listen, see, smell, taste, and touch with an open heart. I sincerely hope that these reflections on Japanese sensory minimalism have inspired you to explore your own senses in a new, deeper, and more enriching way. If these ideas have resonated with you, if you feel invited to live more fully and consciously, I invite you with great joy to join our growing community here at Encanto Minimalista. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey together toward a more conscious, serene life filled with subtle and meaningful beauty. And if this message has given you a new perspective, a moment of inspiration, or an invitation to calm, please give us a like. Your support, that gesture of appreciation, helps us immensely to bring these seeds of well-being and awareness to more people who may be seeking a deeper and more authentic way to connect with life and themselves. Now, as always, I would love to read your thoughts, insights, and experiences. Comment below which of the 5 senses you feel is most dulled, or which you would like to begin cultivating with more intention and care through the practices of sensory minimalism. Write, "Awakening my senses to subtle beauty," if you feel inspired to try these practices and perhaps share your discoveries and transformations with our community. Thank you so much for your time, attention, and exquisite sensitivity. May your senses awaken each day to the infinite and subtle beauty that surrounds you in every moment, in every breath, in every little detail. Matane, detail. Matane, detail. Matane, detail.